The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
And welcome to Midwest Swing Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Berardino. Tom Schreier at the controls, as always. And we have a lot to talk about this week, Tom. We're part of the Zone Coverage Podcast Network, of course. And we encourage you to download Midwest Swing Podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast. We're on Spotify, too, I see. So be sure to leave a review and tell all your friends, every single one of them. But, Tom... Before, we'll get to Byron Buxton and the controversy that the Twins have set off that has the entire industry talking and trying to make sense of this. We will certainly spend a good amount of this podcast on the Byron Buxton affair and look at it from every angle. But first, a couple of things to get to. The Twins made a number of call-ups, September call-ups that did not include Byron Buxton. And, of course, just to recap a little bit, and you can give me thumbs up, thumbs down if you like on some of these, or who you really are most pleased. I think I know which call-up and friend of the podcast that you will be most jacked about. But, Zach Littell is here again. This is his third chance, and he threw pretty well in his last outing on Sunday as the primary pitcher, as the Twins are calling it for now, the man who comes in after the opener. And Zach had a chance to do that a couple of times down at AAA Rochester. And maybe just as important as adapting to the concept is embracing it. And he really articulates well what he likes about it and was adamant even before it went well for him that the numbers are there, and it just makes too much sense for the game to ignore it any longer. The Dodgers have done it recently. The A's have done it with old friend Liam Hendricks as an opener. And, of course, the Rays have been doing it since May and have done it to great effect to the point where they're 10 games over 500 despite trading away a half dozen guys of their own, including Chris Archer and Jake Odorizzi before the season. So, Zach Littell, you okay with that call-up?
Yeah, I'm fine with it, and I like what they did with the opener. I guess I wasn't encouraged with what I saw earlier in the season, but I think this is the time of year to kind of see who's part of your future.
Yeah, and he's the guy, of course, that they got along with Dietrich Enns from the Yankees in the Jaime Garcia trade. He's a spin rate guy, Zach Littell, four-seamer he can leave up in the zone, and it just is one of those pitches that guys will swing under. And he was able to use good off-speed stuff as well. He showed the ability of four-pitch mix to do some damage. The interesting thing about what happened in his primary outing, I keep wanting to call it a start, but it was not a start. It was primary pitching, is that the third time through the order, he was allowed to face two people a third time, and that ended up with a Profar double and a Chirinos homer, and then that was it. Now, I asked Molitor about that after the game, Paul Molitor, saying that it's not hard and fast that the primary will never face the lineup a third time, and Littell said if it goes well, you might even finish the game. You might come in the second or third and finish the game if you were really rolling, but the whole concept was geared. One of the biggest selling points to this, and the Twins had a PowerPoint presentation with minor league pitching coordinator Pete Mackey, the former Duke pitching coach, explaining it to both the guys at AA and AAA. No PowerPoint for Garvin Alston and Paul Molitor in Arlington. But these guys are all told that it's about keeping them from having to face lineups a third time because by then you're pretty much showing all your cards, and hitters can almost predict what's coming, certainly more comfortable than the pitcher at that point, and it's a tiring pitcher. But the Twins let the tiring pitcher, his pitch count was reasonable, but he did not fare well his third time through the order. Johnny Field is back, not Tommy Field. Johnny Field was brought back, and of course Twins fans have seized on that because he didn't show too much. He's a guy with some minor league options. It's probably the biggest selling point that he has is that he does have couple more years of options. He might be on that shuttle to Rochester in future years if he shows anything. He's got a little pop, but he's not Byron Buxton, and he got some starts. Has already gotten starts in left field. Tyler Duffey is back. Did not go well on Sunday in Texas for Duff, and he's basically having a sort of year that shows he's too good for AAA, and for some reason not getting people out in any role in the majors. He's been bounced up and down, and at this point probably needs a fresh start. No one would be surprised if he were taken off the roster this offseason and finds that new start, a fresh start somewhere. Now these call-ups were done in a few different waves. I didn't give you a chance to say thumbs up, thumbs down on Johnny Field.
Johnny Field, the reason why I'm not as intrigued is I think they have, unless Buxton really, really struggles next year, they have kind of 4 guys. I don't know really what his role would be with the team going forward, unless barring injury, trade, something like that. With Duffey, I was interested to see if maybe he could get back on track. I looked that first year he came up. I think it was in Toronto. He struggled, but outside of that, looked all right. But I think you're right. I agree with you. Kind of a guy who may need to change his scenery, and he's entering into his age 28 season. You would think he'd have a couple more seasons to bounce around and try to find a foothold somewhere, given his track record.
Yeah, no, that curveball for the first couple of years, he could tell you it was coming and he'd get you out, but he's definitely lost momentum. No doubt about that. Others that were brought back now in the latest wave that we'll see today. I'll get back to this. I think the most intriguing guy on the list, but we also had Chase DeYoung, I believe you pronounce it. He's the guy they got, 24 years old, right-hander. They got from the Mariners. 2 pieces they got from the Mariners in the Zach Duke trade. DeYoung has a little bit of major league time in 2017 with the Mariners, 6.35 ERA in 28 innings. That did not go well, and he really has never struck out a lot of people. Always in that 6.5 to 7 per 9 range. But the Twins got him and sent him to AAA. He'd been back down in AA this year, and here at age 24. Went to the same high school as Aaron Hicks, by the way, Woodrow Wilson High in Long Beach, California. And he bounced his strikeout rate for 9 innings back up to 7.8. So it will be interesting to talk to him today in Houston and see what he attributes the jump in his strikeout rate to in a limited time with the Twins at AAA. But overall, 160 innings under his belt this year at 2 levels and a 3.66 ERA. And Paul Molitor says he'll get a chance to pitch. John Curtis is back after singing the national anthem and playing on his guitar, although we really couldn't hear the guitar because there was no microphone near it. We'll have to ask him about that frustration. He'd been waiting all these years to sing the anthem before a game in which he would be available out of the pen, and then we couldn't hear the guitar at Rochester, but his voice sounded good. Did you hear Curtis?
I did not. I'm a little surprised he didn't get a chance earlier than this. I know if I remember right, he kind of was spiking sliders the last outing I remember, and I think it was the last time
very
he was
much
up.
So.
But I just, he's a name that kind of popped a little bit just looking at minor league reports and kind of digging into that a little bit. It always seemed like his name would come up kind of in a high leverage situation. He seemed fine. So I understand why they brought him up now. I was just a little surprised they kind of waited this long, given his performance kind of down there, at least from what I can read.
I agree with that. I like the idea of bringing Curtis back. They need to find out. They need to find out if he can control his emotions and that slider. He certainly has more than enough velocity, mid-90s, and has proven that he is closer worthy in the minors. But, of course, up here it's a different deal. I think he will get opportunities. Gregorio Petit, the veteran journeyman utility man, he's back for protection, basically, in case somebody else on that infield goes down. Chris Jimenez is the friend of the program. Chris Jimenez is back, and that's 2 thumbs up, right? Jimenez is back. That, of course, that's the second part of the trade that rocked the industry, as we say. Bobby Wilson for Chris Jimenez, a player to be named or cash, and we all pretty much assume that's just to offset the salary difference between the two. Jimenez might retire after this year. He's going to sit down with his family, Tom. And he has 3 young children, and his wife's back in Reno, and she was not with him, and the kids were not with him during the year, which was mostly spent at AAA Iowa with a little time in between at Wrigley Field with the Cubs, but it did not go the way expected, and he will have a family conference, and I'm negotiating the fact that I think that should be held broadcast live even here at Midwest Swing Pod. The Jimenez family powwow with us, we'd get a vote too, and Brandon Warren as well, because you guys were catching up with the closer quite a bit in 2017.
Yeah, catching up with the catcher, although he may be the closer.
Oh, sorry, the catcher. Sorry.
I will just say this. Brandon and I were texting back and forth. First of all, Bobby Wilson, kind of a similar player and different personality, but kind of a similar guy, right? It seemed like everyone kind of liked him in the locker room. Certainly, he was kind of a fun dude to talk to. But, let's be honest, we were a little excited when Jimenez was back. And the fact that in this game that we talked a little bit before, you had Moya as the opener. That's another guy they traded for, right? And then you got Littell. And then it really fell apart after that. Which inning was that just really came on wound?
There was a 9-run inning. That was the sixth, I think. Yeah, that was the inning that Littell was allowed to face the people for the third time.
But it's right, and I think if you just looked at the ticker, the ESPN ticker, you'd be like, oh, it's just a worthless game. Not really a great result, obviously, but you saw Jimenez both pitched, right, and actually kind of struggled a little bit where he wasn't really giving up much last year, but then
gave up 2 homers.
Yeah, gave up 2 homers, and then he hit a home run, right? And this was like a historic event. It was amazing. It was super fun.
Well, you're also let's not forget, and he's as great a sport in the game as we've ever seen. But I told him yesterday. I said, I tweeted. I hope you don't mind. I tweeted that you ended up -5 if you did it hockey wise, because he also had that soft liner go off his glove. Who am I to say soft liner? But it went off his glove for a 2-run error at first base, which is of course not his primary position. So he allowed 3. Yeah, I don't know. It was a long day. It was a long day for him, and he did hit the 2-run homer, and his career ERA in the majors spiked from 9.9. He's now pitched 11 times, by the way, in the major leagues, and it's now a shade over 13, and that's a shame. With the Twins in 17, he pitched 6 times, of course, and all pretty early in the year, and to a 7.2 ERA, which is better than Irvin Santana's this year, unfortunately. Also, let's talk very briefly about Andrew Vasquez, the left-hander. Great story. Former 32nd round pick out of tiny Westmont College. That's the same school that produced 3 rounds later Hector Lujan, who's going out to the Arizona Fall League this year after another good year down at Fort Myers. And Andrew Vasquez is a guy who's I saw him at the Arizona Fall League last year, and I posted some video of him, and he's just slider, doesn't throw a lot of fastballs. In fact, he'll tell you that he now will throw 65 to 70% sliders, but it's got so much spin and so much bite, and it's so consistent. It's doing what he wants, whether he's trying to throw for a strike or trying to bury it, back foot, whatever, that he can tell you it's coming, and you will not be able to touch it. At least that was the case in the minors. Of course, he comes up and immediately commits 2 errors in 1 inning in his debut inning, which is really hard to do. But he's not broken by it. We had a nice talk yesterday after a year in which he posted a 1.3 ERA coming up on his 25th birthday, 14.0 K per 9 in the minor leagues this year overall in those 69 innings. So the Twins are going to get a longer look at him because he would be Rule 5 eligible in December if not added. And Taylor Cameron is the area scout down there who saw these 2 guys, Lujan and Vasquez, who transferred as a pair from Cal Santa Barbara to Westmont College, and that's pretty good value in the 32nd, 35th round. You send those guys off to these levels.
No, I agree. I hadn't heard a ton about him before, but I guess that's the other upside to this. We kind of talked about it with Jimenez, but you either are looking kind of more technically at these guys who. If you're at all familiar with the minor leagues, you've seen their name before. And then there's these guys who, he's 20. So he's about 25, right? He's about
to turn 25. Yes.
Yeah. So still, has potential. But if anything, he also has this story potential, right, of why he left Santa Barbara, as you just mentioned, how you got a guy like this in the 32nd round, and even just how it's the funny thing about baseball is that you never know kind of when you're going to acquire some of your best players.
There's not too many of those stories anymore of late round picks making it all the way, but when they happen, they're great stories. So, and we also have to mention that among the call-ups, even though he was already up, doing his live bullpens every few days. Matt Belisle, fan favorite. Matt Belisle was activated off the DL and immediately came in with his new arm angle and hit Adrian Beltre by mistake. He swears, and I believe him because Matt Belisle does not lie. And he made a point of calling us over and making it clear that he had dropped down with a new arm angle and the ball just got away, even though that was in the midst of a 9-run inning. And so he's been fined, but he's appealing the fine, and he's back. And the reason why some fans right now at this moment would be upset with Belisle even being given this opportunity or Jimenez coming out and pitching out of the bullpen is that a couple of very interesting arms were not brought up. They would have had to be added to the 40-man. That's still possible because you could move Irvin Santana for one to the 60-day DL. That's happening any time now. He's done for the year and probably as a Twin. But Jake Reed, former Twins 5th-round pick, turning 26 later this month. Since June 1st, Tom, Jake Reed has pitched to a 1.43 ERA at AAA. He struck out 38 in 37 and 2/3 innings, so 1 per inning, which for a reliever is good but not amazing. Not Andrew Vasquez, 14. And a few too many walks, but no home runs. And I would have thought that they'd want to take a look at Jake Reed. And Nick Anderson, a Minnesotan, who's been through a lot and a late bloomer, he's 28 now. He pitched 60 innings at AAA this year, 3.3 ERA with a 13.2 strikeouts per 9. He's not up. And I asked Paul Molitor yesterday after the game, after these latest call-ups were announced, would there be another wave after this? And he made me believe that there would not be unless something happened to the current group, and because they don't want to overcrowd things. Well, that's where it's at. I don't think Twins are going to get to see it. Of course, Nick Gordon did not hit enough this year. The defensive reports were somewhere between meh and disastrous. At shortstop, he got more time at second. He did not take advantage of the AAA opportunity. He had a nice run there at AA early in the year to get to AAA, and then he's got more to prove, and he needs to be added to the 40-man in November, or be Rule 5 eligible. And, of course, Kenny Vargas still has fans out there. I think we all enjoyed covering Kenny. It's sad. I mean, he did win International League Player of the Week, I believe, late in the year, but he's 28. And this is the first year, Tom, since 2013 that Kenny Vargas has not been with the Twins in the majors at all. So it seems to have run its course. I do think next stop for Kenny, because they love power over there in the Japanese leagues. He's had some interest in the past. He wasn't ready before. He's ready now. And I would have to think that's the next stop. I want to go over real quick the Fall League guys, and we do need to talk about Byron Buxton because we teased it, and it's what's on people's minds. Yeah. But the Fall League group that the Twins will be sending to Arizona this year, it's 8 names. Normally it's 7, but they have 8. I think they're covering themselves in case of injury. Maybe they have a taxi squad type thing out there where they can designate. I don't know exactly how that'll work. But the big name there was Brent Rooker, who people are very intrigued by and should be. AA Chattanooga this year. On-base guy, power guy from day one. This is his first full season in the majors after they took him in the supplemental first round, or in the minors in supplemental first round. And he'll be going out there. And if he has a big fall league, there'll be talk about him. I'm sure he'll come into big league camp. And depending on what they do with Joe Mauer, Rooker can play first, he can play left, he can DH. He's right in there with Tyler Austin in the mix of potential successors. I do think he'll get some time, though, in AAA next year. And they're also sending out Luke Raley, left-handed hitting outfielder that they got from the Dodgers in the Brian Dozier deal, and Jalen Davis, an outfielder who they came up through their system after drafting. They're both at AA. Rayleigh showed some pop, as they expect. And then Devin Smeltzer, another reliever lefty that they got from that same Dodgers deal for Dozier, he's getting a chance to go out there, so they'll quickly get some answers on those guys. And then we already mentioned Hector Lujan, who can touch 95 at times and has a lot of closing experience. He's going out west. Alex Robinson, the left-hander, who also can run it up there into the mid to high 90s. Travis Blankenhorn, infielder, who they took around the same time as Cabbage to third baseman. Blankenhorn can play second or third and even bounce around some more. But the one who's really on the fast track now is this Griffin Jacks. Griffin Jacks, who is from Air Force Academy. He's going to be 24 this off season, and they didn't really know when they took him how much time they'd be able to get him on the field with his Air Force commitments. But because baseball is coming back to the Olympics in 2020, those rules were somewhat softened to allow a baseballer who might be able to represent the U.S. in the Olympics potentially to get on the field. And he threw 85 innings for the Miracle as of last week, and he had a 3.28 earned run average and a 5-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio. Has all the pitches, just needs some reps. So those are the 8 guys heading west. Play begins on October 9th. Griffin Jackson, intriguing to you as well, right?
Yeah, I always see it's him and Lewis Thorpe, I feel like, stand out in those minor league reports as guys who seem kind of on the ascent. And I guess especially with Jax, I didn't know much about him until kind of he started showing up with a few good outings this year.
Yeah, Lewis Thorpe, I was remiss in leaving him out of the snubs because he got to the Futures game this year and really had a really nice year at 2 levels and was doing good things at AAA. But the call went to DeYoung, who's a little more advanced than Thorpe. He's already gotten to the majors, but DeYoung
also second round pick, so they must feel like change of scenery would help him.
Yeah, he had some pedigree to him. Okay, so Byron Buxton. First of all, I was not shocked, and I don't think the fans should have been shocked exactly by the way it went down, in that there were hints being dropped along the way. A lot of talk, you've seen it throughout August, in Molitor's pregame sessions about how Buxton was coming along. There were not particularly raves at any point, even though his numbers were really starting to spike. But and then when I asked Derek Falvey in Cleveland at midweek about that, after Molitor made it clear no decision had been made, and I brought up the service time aspect to Falvey at that point. If fans are just tuning in, Byron Buxton is now under Twins control through 2022 instead of the expected 2021 because of 13 days of service time, meaning time in the major leagues, whether you play or not, whether you're on the active roster or not, you're in the major leagues, DL or active roster. He fell 13 days shy. I noted at the time in July when they converted a rehab option to a rehab assignment to a full minor league option that he was 13 days shy, and he would need those this year, or they'd have an extra year of control. At the time, it seemed far-fetched that the Twins would actually play that card. In the end, that's what they did. Were you shocked?
I'm not. The thing that's more concerning to me, I certainly thought Buxton would be up, but I remember talking to him in Chicago. We traveled minimally this year, but I did get out there once, and he was saying, he really wants to get out there, even though the toe was messed up. And I can't tell if I know it's being portrayed as the team kind of forced him to play when he's injured. I know that he also kind of wanted to get out there as well. But regardless, that seems like they mishandled that he just was not able to swing with the toe injury. Certainly you add in the migraines and the wrist injury and all this stuff. What confuses me is it seems like if it really he was hurt, why was he not shut down earlier? Kind of to do a reset, to kind of see if they can get him healthy, and understanding that you're going to have this extra year control. And that to me is frustrating, just because I hope these things don't start to add up and become kind of lingering issues throughout his career.
He is, he is heading for age 25, and this off season, And coming off a 5.2 WAR season, according to Baseball Reference, Fangraphs had it a little lower, had it in the threes. But what he did in 2017 seemed to establish him as a major leaguer. Now, this service time aspect and the word grievance has been tossed around, and for good reason, because it very well could result in a grievance. I think the representation at Jet Sports Management, BB Abbott, Al Getz, they're still considering their options. The union is taking, Major League Baseball Players Association, taking a very close look at this. I've talked with Kyle Gibson about this issue because he is now, after Dozier's trade, the union representative among the players in that clubhouse for the Twins. And everyone wants to see if there is recourse, to use Thad Levine's term, for Buxton's camp to try to get him either up to the major leagues, which does not appear likely, or a grievance would perhaps credit him with service time that he was not able to accrue. All that meaning that he would eventually try to get onto that free agent market at age 28 going into 2022, instead of playing his age 28 season for the Twins as his final year of free agency. Now, what's the full meaning of that? Well, 5.2 WAR season that he's already shown he can put up, one WAR, one win above replacement, basically equates to $8 million of value above a replacement player you could find to take his spot. Well, I use my calculator and I come up with about 41 million and change, and a chance to have another 5 WAR season out of Buxton, a healthy Buxton now fully established at age 28 in 2022, is very appealing. The Twins, though, should be pointed out, and Thad Levine met this straight on in announcing this after Saturday night's game, gave 3 reasons. These are the 3 primary reasons why Buxton was not recalled. The first reason had to do with health issue. The Twins believe that he's still playing through what they call a lingering left wrist issue. The left wrist, not bad enough to keep him off the field in AAA, as many have pointed out. And you don't want Buxton to get hurt at AAA any more than you want him to get hurt in the majors. But that's what the Twins are saying, that he was able to put up these numbers, an 1,100-plus OPS in the last couple of weeks of August, with a wrist that was still not quite right. I've asked if there were any plans to send Buxton to a specialist to have a full breakdown on where that wrist stands and is it healthy or not. And at the moment, last I asked, there were no such plans. It surprised me a little bit. Second part was performance related overall, and not just by the numbers that we can see readily available, not even the old school numbers, but all the sortable stats that you can see, anything. Buxton's numbers on balance were very solid, but again, what way are you going to look at them? You want to look at the strikeouts that are still up in the 30% range? Do you want to look at the quality of contact? The Twins have suggested that he's been too pull happy, that he's perhaps been hitting in some good luck in terms of batting average on balls in play, that the exit velocities aren't where they want them. It's not like he had just destroyed AAA pitching, certainly was not destroying it before he hurt his wrist in those first couple of weeks of July. And the third part, which is, again, wiggle room for the Twins, was the lack of readily available playing time in the major leagues. And this comes back to right now in September, and this is at a moment when Jake Cave, a rookie that they got for a low-A pitcher, a Dominican Summer League pitcher who's done very well in the Appalachian League, but they got Jake Cave off of the Yankees' remainder bin, and he's been a revelation. But he can play all 3 outfield spots. Eddie Rosario is currently nursing a quad injury that he told me yesterday. He did hit a little bit indoors and he ran a little bit, but he's still going slowly with this. The Twins are taking it slowly. So they would appear to have the ability to shift Jake Cave over to left and bring up Byron Buxton and let him play center. But they chose not to do that. And one of the reasons given was lack of available at bat. So you could also DH one of these guys if you wanted to and give Buxton a chance to run around and do his thing in center. What has elevated this, Tom, to a national discussion and a potential test case, I believe, in my discussions with people on the union side of this and agents around the game, what people are watching this so closely for is, I pointed out in my story at TwinCities.com, written on Sunday, about Jurickson Profar of the Rangers, who last year, in a very similar situation to Buxton, they were even both 24 at the time. Profar was 24 last year. 70 plate appearances in the big league with a 172 batting average last year for Profar. Buxton hit 156 in 94 big league trips. Profar was playing in AAA, healthy, ready to go, but 7 days shy of turning over the meter, as it were, and becoming a future free agent in 2 years in his case. And the Rangers sent him home. They did not call him up in September. They were out of it. They sent him home, and there were threats of a grievance, but a grievance was never filed as far as anyone can tell. Byron Buxton sent home 13 days shy of turning that meter over and getting to 3 full years of service time. There's talk and rumblings around the game of a grievance. It'll be interesting to see if one is filed, but the difference is Thad Levine, being a straight shooter and one who answers the questions as they are asked, said the following after announcing this move on Saturday night, quote, "I think part of our jobs is we're supposed to be responsible to factoring service time into every decision we make. We wouldn't be doing our jobs if we weren't at least aware of service time impacts on decisions we make." And I have asked around, and it struck me at the time as being a groundbreaking statement, and a case where generally people wink and nod and shrug if they're on the management side when such moves are made, but no one ever just comes right out and says service time is a factor. Indeed, Derek Falvey just a few days earlier said service time would not be taken into consideration. Now, Levine said that the first 3 reasons that he gave were the larger concern, by far, he suggested. But, Tom, when you give a statement like that that's so straightforward and uses the very term and terminology that the industry on the management side works so hard to ignore / avoid in public, now you do wonder if this doesn't go to a grievance, and that's Exhibit A, as some have mentioned.
Yeah, no, and entirely. And I just wonder if, looking at it more broadly, it seems like the future still lies with Buxton. So no, I'm sure people now are turning the page to Royce and Kirilloff, but I think that's a little too ambitious, maybe, to say that it relies, or that these guys would make an immediate impact. I still believe that these guys need to pan out for kind of this turnaround to happen. And I kind of look at what they did with Sano, and he is back in the majors, and it seemed like his attitude was great about it the whole time, and service time did factor into that a little bit as well. But I could see where people maybe are freaking out a little bit, saying Sano still looks a little rough around the edges, and Byron Buxton, even with the additional time, supposedly that he would be on the team, are they really doing the best thing for him? Are they really going to make him, have him pan out? And I just get this sense of panic a little bit. They're starting to see Nick Gordon not hit a little bit, and Cole Stewart come up and struggle, and kind of some of these guys who are supposed to be the next wave. There hasn't been this overwhelming kind of feeling of confidence that the Twins would go into the next season and have a lot of these young guys who supposedly the future was kind of held in their hands turn this thing around.
And beyond that, they not only did they need answers to the future for a lot of these young core pieces, such as Eddie Rosario, Jorge Polanco, Sano, of course, Max Kepler, Barrios. Many of them answered in the affirmative, or at least trending toward the positive side. But now you've introduced whatever momentum you had made privately, or just determinations you thought you had made on what it would take to sign some of these guys to the type of multi-year pre-free agency deals that give an organization like the Twins stability going forward, momentum, a sense of a reliable core, and not this revolving door of a lineup. That for now been jeopardized because Byron Buxton, very popular in that clubhouse, obviously already proven what he can do for a team at the major league level in terms of on the field. He's proven what he can do in the community to electrify those in the stands and in uniform at his best when healthy. He did that in 2017. Did it late in the year in 2016. But has not been able to do it consistently. But now everyone who considers Byron a friend in that clubhouse, starting with Miguel Sano, who has really grown close to him over the years, is going to be wary, I have to believe, of management and any offer put forth. And certainly if it's team-friendly in the least, it's going to be hard. No one has signed up. Not a single one of these guys has signed up yet. And that surprises me because I wrote this story last November at TwinCities.com with Thad Levine speaking at length about how vital that sort of approach was to the Texas Rangers when they got things rolling again. And Ian Kinsler was one of their very first, Elvis Andrews along the way, that Martin Perez. They signed a good 6 to 8 of them, I believe, 5 to 7. And you would have thought by now there would have been someone who would have taken the plunge. A lot of times these young players and their agents will look around and wait for someone to be the Pied Piper, to take the first perhaps team-friendly deal. Your hope is always that it's fair in both directions, but no one has done that. If they'd been able to get, and I know that they did talk to Buxton in the spring, along with the others, but I don't think they ever had any traction with anything on Buxton because it just wasn't. They weren't speaking the same language on what his value was, and there was the Mookie Betts arbitration number, which was pretty stout. It was 9 figures in his first try at arbitration, and that threw some things off. But when Miguel Sano says to me, I said, well, how are you going to feel if Byron is not called up on Friday in Texas? And he said, I don't think that's good. That would be tough for me and for him and his family. I think he needs to come here and finish strong and play the last month, and that's it. And Miguel further said that he'd been in touch with Buxton, of course, and he said they'd been talking about how he feels, and he said, Sano told me he feels good. He's been playing good too. I hope he can be here, but I don't know. And so there were a lot of players in there waiting for Buxton to return, really wondering at times, the minute he was healthy again in mid-August, Tom, why wasn't he back? And now we see how it ended for now. And it will be something that a cloud now that will hang over not just Byron Buxton and his future with the Twins, but I would submit to you the entire young core will be waiting to see how this is handled. Now, one last thing before we wrap this up on this, and that would be make amends. The phrase make amends was used by Thad Levine on Saturday night, that the hope was they understood that the feelings were raw, but they hoped that they would have an opportunity to, quote-unquote, make amends with Buxton in the future. What do you think that might mean? How does that look? Because I have my own thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like he's probably not going to be taking a team-friendly deal like that. Maybe make it up with extra money in his pocket if he starts to take off. I mean, I don't know what else you would do. Maybe you have something in mind, but between now and then to make it up to him, I mean, in some ways, they have to get right by the player, but also kind of going back to what I said, they kind of have to do right by the fans. Certainly people probably are happy there's an extra year of control, but at the same time, they haven't done much going into the final month here of the season to paint kind of a shiny picture going into next year. It almost seems like they have to use next year as the kind of believe in us, right? Get people behind the whole regime and organization and the young players that are supposed to be making an impact on the field.
Yes, and we haven't even gotten into Joe Mauer,
right?
The 2018 Roberto Clemente Award nominee for character and off-field achievements that the Twins announced today. And what will they do with Joe Mauer? But make amends to me on Buxton. I've asked around on this, and I can certainly tell you what they probably cannot do. He is arbitration eligible. I don't know if I mentioned that. He is a Super 2, as they call it. He's in the top 21 or 22% of service time of those who fell short of 3 full years. So he's good with that. He will get a bump from the $600,000 range up to automatically into the 2 million plus range, perhaps 3. Kind of, these things are on a sliding scale depending on how the comparables look at your position and your service time. I will say that going into this past off season, Eddie Rosario, off the year he had, which was more of a full year in 17, was looking at 3.5 million according to MLB Trade Rumors. And Matt Schwartz and his projection models are pretty good. So you could say Buxton has shade below that, considering he didn't have a full year in 17 and, of course, an injury marred year this year. Let's say Buxton, in the natural scheme of arbitration, would be 2.5 million going into 2019. Well, would making amends be, okay, Byron, we know it's 2.5, but, here's an extra million, here's an extra $1.5 million, we'll pay you 4 next year. Well, not so fast, my friends, because there's a labor relations department that would come in and say, no, you're affecting the entire ecosystem
right.
of how the arbitration system works. We cannot have artificially inflated deals that let the system work. You can't have these side deals. And I'm not even sure that an extra $1 million would salve the wounds here and smooth things. I don't know what it would take exactly. But like you said, the trust factor has taken a hit. The idea of a team-friendly deal probably out. Now, I also wondered, well, could you have the normal 2.5 million? I've asked around with agents, could you have the normal 2.5 million, let's say, in theory for 2019, but load it up with incentives? You can put performance bonuses in there based on how many at-bats. If he's on the field for the full season or enough in 2019, let him double that, let's say. So another 2.5 in bonuses. Now he's up to 5. Let him earn it. You can do that. Doesn't happen a lot, but it's usually at a very small number. And I was told, no way will the union sign off on that because, again, that's going to warp the system. And then from the major league side and the labor relations department, they're going to say, no, we can't have that because he's going to take that inflated number with the bonuses and come back in the next year at arbitration table as a 3+ at that point and work off of 5 million, let's say, instead of 2.5. That's how they would have to look at it. They would count all the earnings. So that's out. The one thing I think we'll leave with this, the one thing that could work is a multi-year extension, and in this case it's probably not going to be that mega deal because you haven't seen enough of Byron on the field, and Byron hasn't seen enough of how they're going to treat him going forward. But it has been suggested to me that a multi-year deal would take the earnings for 2019 and 2020 technically out of the arbitration system. You take that out of it, and there wouldn't be quite the limitations on how you structured it then. People would have to just let it happen. And you could certainly load that one up with incentives, and you could load up a multi-year deal. Just 2 years probably would be the safest way. And that might be something like 2 years, $8 million plus performance bonuses. If he's on the field, he'll get paid. For plate appearances is basically how it's done. I could see that happening. The people I talked to could see that happening, but good luck trying to figure out where to start that process. Right now, as Paul Molitor said, time tends to be the best ally.
Yeah.
Both sides are kind of in their neutral corners, and I think you have reasonable people all the way around, from Byron to his representatives who've been in this game a long time, just put Chipper Jones in the Hall of Fame, to Thad Levine and Derek Falvey and Jim Pohlad. They'll all find a way after they step back and figure this out. But this was probably not the way and the type of talk that anyone who closely follows the Twins and those out there who root for the Twins wanted to see September go.
I agree. I guess my final question for you, because we brought this up, Nick Anderson could have been kind of the local favorite. Jake Reed's name's been in there for a while. Obviously, we talked a while about Buxton, big, I would say even a national level story, and certainly something felt here in Minnesota. What would have to happen in the final month in your mind to maybe turn that narrative around, or do you really think that it comes down to what they do in the winter and how they come out of the gates next year to kind of create some optimism and positivity around the team?
Yeah, it's not like, because wins in September aren't going to do it.
Yeah,
that's not going to do it. Fort Day they're having on Sunday, yes, with Trevor May and Mitch Garver playing their video games Fortnite and streamed live in the stadium against professional players, including I think Jordan Foster. That's not going to do it. And even an off season in which they spent this past off season, they were targeted, and I endorsed virtually every one of those moves. I thought they were very sharp in what they did. It didn't work. Even that people will now view warily, because Logan Morrison, Lance Lynn, et cetera, it did not work out the way they hoped, and it certainly didn't lead to enough winning. I think you're going to have to get well into the 2019 season challenging for first place, not just a wild card, but somehow for first place in the American League Troll in order to create that goodwill. Winning does cure things, but it has to happen in the context where the ultimate prize is still available, and that's no longer the case for 2018. So that's where the Twins are at. It could be some more pain in September. Would have liked to have seen them bring up Jake Reed and Nick Anderson, among others. Can't bring everybody up, I understand that, but if you're going to have open tryouts, at least have it with people that you have a reasonable expectation will be part of your program going forward, and maybe even make the opening day roster next year. They left off some good candidates. That is our podcast for this week. Thanks, Tom, for everything and guiding this conversation back onto the rails when we needed to, and you made good points. I don't think we disagreed on too many things call-up wise or Buxton wise, but it's a sad topic because everybody wants to see and enjoy Byron Buxton, the electrifying talent at his best, and he's not here. He's going back home to Georgia to rest up and get healthy. This has been a Midwest Swing podcast, part of the Zone Coverage Podcast Network. Reminder to please download our podcast, Midwest Swing, on iTunes or any of your favorite podcast apps. Please leave a review, positive reviews only, and we will see you next week with a new topic.